What is up, all you GBA side people? This is Tom, and we're here with your pick and crew week 4. With me, as always.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's McCaddy, and we have got a very interesting week coming up in terms of picks. But before we go on to that, we're going to be starting off going back to last week's picks, week 3 picks, because there's been some very, very interesting ones. Overall, we seem to have done pretty well in terms of our predictions, but there's 2 games that definitely stand out as ones where, as a sort of total group of analysts, we got it pretty wrong for this one. So I don't know, which game would you like to start on then, Tom?
Is that really a question you want to ask? I mean, I know which one I want to start with.
I know exactly which one you want to start with, and let's get it over and done with. Start of the video.
I just had to stick with Dan. I had a feeling, everyone was kind of on the Lars train. I'm like, you know what? I think Dan's good enough. This is a good week for the upset, and I was right, and I'm happy that I was right. But Nick, though, that was a good pick as well.
Yeah, I would definitely say Nick pulled through with his Nick definitely pulled through with his choice of Geo for that one. We all decided to go for Tup, thinking Tup was going to pull through for this one, but Nick's got some sort of sixth sense, I think, and managed to pull through, betting on the underdog and finishing off the week as well with a really strong 7-1, bringing him back into the game for the overall totals for the whole pick'ems.
Yeah, Nick certainly is beginning to claw himself back into relevancy, because back in week 2, even him and Blue, they were so far behind in terms of picks. Going 7-1 and coming back the way that he's doing, he could be relevant like this week based on all of his picks. But with that being said, the overall to date right now looks as we have 4 analysts at 17-7 overall, with you being ahead of us all with your 3-0 lock of the week picks.
Well, I don't know. I always try and bet safe with the locks, and that tactic does seem to be paying off. At least for the time being. We've still got plenty more weeks to go, and I imagine the 4 of us will be starting to split as the weeks progress from there.
I can certainly agree with that. I think these, especially this week, which we'll get into, very hard games to pick. But besides that, we have Kelly at 16-8, still perfect on his lock of the weeks, and then of course we have Nick clawing back very steadily, as well as Blue still playing the underdog guy at 11-13. Overall, I had a fun time last week. It was nice getting Dan right, but definitely more excited with this week. And with that being said, let's go right into it.
Yeah, so next week we've got some really, really tricky games to try and call. Quite a few ones where we're quite split on our decisions. First one's obviously, as you guys can see, John versus Dan. Now, there is a bit more on the sort of Dan side compared to John's side, and I don't know if do you want to start off then, Tom, and let's sort of tell us a little bit about why you think Dan has this one?
Listen, I believed in Dan last week. I think he played very well. I think that the way he's planning, I just like it a little more than how John has been playing. But, this one's a toss-up. It's really close. 2 great competitors, 2 almost perennial playoff teams. I just have a better feeling of Dan, and so do 4 other people besides me.
No, I do appreciate that. I think for this game, I put my faith in John for the match last week against Shady, and he pulled through, so I figured I'm still unsure about this one. I'll give him another go. He seems to be doing well for me. I think Dan, they both got a lot of threats that sort of challenge each other, but I think John overall just has that slight edge, but that's just my personal opinion anyway. So anyway, moving on, we have got the match with Fizz versus Lars, which I think is going to be an incredibly hype match, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this one. Tom, it is your lock of the week for this one, so do you want to go through some of your reasoning of why you decided to choose that one?
So with Fizz, I'm really digging Fizz right now. My lock of the week, I think that he's red hot right now. As far as Lars goes, his planning has been really good as well, but I think Fizz has just been that much better. I look for Fizz to overcome Lars, especially his defensive and creative walls, in a way that most people won't necessarily predict. I think he's going to come through with something that is going to be it's not going to be your Sand Stoutland sweep. It's going to be something a little different, but I think it's going to work so much so that he's going to win. It looks like Baby Nick also has Fizz as his lock of the week. He thinks that Fizz will dominate with a commanding victory. He looks for Fizz to have at least a 3-0 victory, but he believes more in the Stoutland Sandrush sweep, and even some work given by Togekiss as well. I'm deviating a little bit from the pack here, but I think it's a fair assessment.
I think that's fair. I think the 3-0 is a little bit bold, dare I say it. I think Lars has definitely got it in him even if it is a loss, I think it's going to be a bit closer than that. But Fizz's prep has definitely been on point this season, and he also, if Lars shows any sign of weakness at all, Fizz has just got that ability to be able to hold on to that and just completely run with it and do a huge amount of damage to Lars as well. So that's why I personally think that Fizz has got this one.
Moving on from there, we have Shady versus Geo. Now, just as we saw last week with Pittsburgh versus San Francisco, we had Baby Nick pick Geo, and this week I guess it's no different. He's the only one out of all of us that's going with Geo. We're going with Shady. It looks like Burke, though, has his lock of the week on Shady. He thinks that Shady has a fantastic Fire, Water, Grass core, and Rhyperior walls all of Geo's team. Bold call. He should be able to use his offense to break through Geo's bulk and therefore pick up the victory. Now, what do you think?
I wouldn't necessarily agree that Shady can completely shut down all of Geo's team, but I would say overall that Shady's been performing really, really well, and I would argue say performing better than Geo has for the time being. I think Shady's got ways to work around like Mega Pincer and stuff like that, but my only worry is whether Shady will be able to balance both offense to handle, Geo's wall core, but also have enough defense to not get swept by Mega Pincer. I think if he gets that balance right, then I think the game's almost definitely in his favor for that one.
So from there, we have, 3 games, for lack of better words, that are all unanimous in terms of how us, the analysts, have chosen. We have Crimson versus Tup, which all of us are just lining up right behind Tup there and telling him, go, you got it, because that's how we feel about
Whatever you do, don't let us down, Tup.
Exactly. And we have Kelly even more so confident. He thinks that Tup is his lock of the week. He believes that, as crazy as it sounds, Tup can and does have a great matchup up against Crimson. He thinks that if his Mega T-Tar can get up a Dragon Dance before Infernape can, go ahead and kill it with a Fighting Stab, he can win. And I think that's it's a very generous call. But, maybe he doesn't bring T-Tar this week. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's quite fair. I think also one thing I did notice that if Tup decides to bring Scarf, Mold Breaker, Excadrill, that thing could potentially do a huge amount of damage to Crimson's team. Because I think his only non-levitating sort of flying type that can actually not take Earthquakes is Staraptor, if I remember rightly. And the rest of his team just gets absolutely wrecked by an Earthquake. So I think that's going to be a thing that Tup's going to bring. That's just my sort of prediction on this game. But I think regardless of that, I think Tup's got this one. And luckily the rest of the analysts do agree with me on this one. And it should be an interesting match to see.
So from here, before we move on to the next game, I want to introduce a new segment that we'll be doing. We're calling it the Weekly Chatter. Now, this is just specifically going to be going over a headline or just a certain talking point that Makati and I can briefly discuss and maybe just, put some ideas on the table. So this week, we have Crimson versus Tup. Now, between these two coaches, we've seen the really, really good and the really, really awful. We've seen them play fantastically, like we're looking at week 1, and then Crimson in week 2. But then we had this past week where both of them just got demolished. And this game, I think, now obviously one team's going to win, one team's going to lose. But I think this week is important, especially because this is the, for lack of better words, this is the writing of their ship. They got to set sail again, they got to redirect their direction, and they got to run with it. This game, I think, determines how relevant they are in the playoff picture. Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree. I think also we're coming into those sort of couple of weeks where if you get some losses at this point, then playoffs just look so far away and distant that it's very difficult to then try and pick your game back up and actually get to the playoffs from there. Whereas if you get a couple of wins this time, then playoffs look much closer. And I have a feeling that this game is going to be pushing one of them much closer towards playoffs potential, and one of them is going to get really knocked back. And this game is going to be actually a really important game for them.
This is very important for both of them, especially because they are lower, have taken those losses, and definitely need to pick it up. From there, we'll move into Gubs versus Miguel. Now we have 2 locks of the week on this pick, and it looks like, again, everyone's just going with Miguel. I think he, if you listen to the recap of the power rankings, he definitely got his planning back on track. He certainly, adjusted to his loss against George. And this week we have your lock of the week as well as Hank's.
So I decided to go for the lock of the week on this one because I think this one is the safest match to bet on, personally. I feel Miguel has been doing really, really well in comparison to Gubbs' performance, and I think Gubbs still needs to shake off some of that rust, and I think on top of that as well, I think Miguel kind of underestimated George when he battled him, and that may have cost him a match there, and I don't think Miguel is going to make the same mistake this time, and he's going to be going at Gubbs all guns blazing, and I don't even think he's going to let Gubbs have a single shred of chance that he's going to be getting this victory. He's going to be on point, really, really going for it, both the battling side and also the team building side, because he cannot afford for Gubbs to beat him.
One might even say he's going to be going in Gubbs.
Oh my goodness.
I'll see myself.
Yeah, I'll finish the rest of the video. It's fine.
Okay. But finally, we have Hank and his lock of the week. He thinks that Miguel is one of the most consistent coaches. Even though Gubbs has been consistent, like I just said, he still has rust, and his performance has been a bit lackluster. So he thinks that Miguel comes through with this one because for the simple fact that he does not have the same rust that Gubbs has been experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's fair, to be honest. So moving on, we have the match of Nips versus Hayden. Now, this is another one where all of the analysts are putting their hope into Hayden, and Meister's reasoning behind this, I think it's going to be a close game, but I personally feel like Nips just doesn't have the tools to dismantle Hayden's wall cores and things like that. Almost any combination. I think maybe the exception might be that Gengar, but I think Hayden will have some way to try and play around that. And especially after the last match against Miguel, where he didn't get too much time to prep, I think he's going to make sure this match, he's going to really put a good amount of prep in for this one and make sure he can pull that win to bring himself back into the competition. I don't know if you've got anything else to add there, Tom?
Well, I was just thinking, not even that. What about Whimsicott? He could Giga Drain the Slowbro. He has Stab for the Mega Sableye, and then Whimsicott can get Taunt, as well as Sleep Powder or whatever, and essentially nullify Clefable if Hayden does decide to.
I do think that's fair. Sure. Yeah, he can definitely shut down any setup as well, and it could be a bit of annoyance, but it just depends on how well Hayden's prepped for that. So the next match we've got is Steve versus Malvone, and currently there's this is almost a 50-50 split on this one. We've got 3 of us going for Malvone, and then 4 people believing in Steve for this one, and we've even got Blue with the lock of the week there, betting on Steve winning this match.
Blue says he's all in. That's it. He's all in for this week, and he needs this to happen. Mega Gardevoir is heavily favored against Malvone's team. The Loud Red lineup isn't necessarily as capable of taking on Mega Gardevoir, and not only that, but it's also very predictable. We've seen the same 5 of 6 the past 3 weeks.
I do kind of agree with that, but I think Malvone, he may end up pulling something out. He's still starting to get used to his team. Maybe this is the week where he starts getting used to it. I know you guys all still believe in Steve, but I think it's gone up to a point now where I feel I have to go for Malvone for this one. I want to believe in Steve and everything like that, but as a safe bet, I think Malvone is the slightly safer bet on this one.
I have to go with Steve because I believe in effort, and recognizing your mistakes trumps, just kind of going into a match being very lackadaisical.
Definitely.
I just have to. I think that this is Steve's week to lose, and I don't want to say that. But leading into that, we'll go back in our second weekly chatter point, where the analysts have, and even last week, said that their confidence in Steve is dwindling, and it's dwindling mighty fast. So this week is the week to decide whether we continue to hashtag believe in Steve, start that up, or do we forget that he is relevant and we use him as a perennial punching bag, for the rest of the season? Hope it's not the latter because, hashtag.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I do believe in Steve, but then I always like to make the safe bet. I'd be a terrible gambler, I must admit. I'd always go for the safe option. So I want Steve to do well. I think he's been putting a really good amount of effort in, and I can definitely see improvement. It's just whether that improvement will allow him to meet there's some very strong competition this season, and I'm hoping that with improvement, Steve might start to be able to get up to there, but at the minute, I'm not willing to place my chip on his table just yet.
Finally, we have Nick versus George. And we seem to be, We have two people picking George this week, being Burke and you. So I'd like to hear your reasoning. But then we have the rest of us on Nick and the Boston
Yeah,
Red
so I think
Sox.
this one's going to be a really hard one to call, but a match I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think it's going to be like, I think George is going to have it in his mind that he wants to beat Nick and prove himself to show that exactly what he can do. I think Nick's got quite a few different threats like Manaphy and things like that George has a bit of a problem with, but I think George is going to find a way. He always finds a way, I find. And Gothitelle as well could be a really, really useful asset for George this week. Being able to get rid of one of Nick's walls and help Mega Lopunny sweep could be really, really crucial this match.
I think as long as he stays confident and doesn't underestimate his own personal abilities to compete, I think it should be fine.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, as I said, it's gonna be the match of the week that I'm looking forward to the most, I must admit.
Fair enough point. And with that being said, that was your Week 4 Pick'em. See y'all on Sunday.
See you guys.